Donald Trump's red wave is complete. He has secured the presidency by the biggest margin by a Republican in 36 years. He has secured the Senate, the House, the popular vote, biggest ever by a Republican, and won every single swing state. You spoke to Donald Trump in recent days. How do you think Trump 2.0 will be different to his first term?
Well, that snap was taken in Mar-a-Lago on the night of the election, where I was there, and it was at the convention center when he gave his victory speech. It's early days. The transition is taking place. Early appointments have already been announced. Some more are imminent, and it's clear, I think, several things already. One is that Trump and Trump's team have said for a long time, that they wanted to come in with, first of all, with a resounding victory. When his team said to me at the Madison Square Gardens event a couple of weeks ago now, that they wanted not only to secure a victory, but such a decisive victory that it would include the popular vote, I thought, well, sure, everybody would like that. But the fact that they actually achieved it is remarkable. And there's several very important things about that. One is it gives Donald Trump an extraordinarily clear and clean mandate. The second thing is that the Democrats can play none of the games about, well, the Electoral College this, the popular vote that. No, he got all of it. And that should cause some serious time for reflection in the Democrat Party. But Trump and his team have been clear about a number of things. Firstly, they seem to everything I've heard, to be fully aware that in the 2016 to 20 administration, there was a lot of firing, a lot of hiring. By the way, even that's different from President Joe Biden, who never fired anyone. Sometimes you wonder if he was even aware who was working for him. But there was a lot of, everyone's aware there was a lot of upheaval in the first term. I think there's a very clear desire to make sure that's not the case this time. And they're getting people into positions who have not just experience, but who have a very clear mandate themselves. I mean, getting people like Congresswoman Elise Stefanik into the United Nations job, looks like Congressman Tim Waltz also. This is a very serious administration that's being put together with some very distinguished figures in it already. And so I think the main thing is just that thing, not just of some continuity, but of a sort of an intent to have a calmness in the administration this time that was sometimes missing last time. It's also clear that there's going to be no sort of recruiting of people who aren't Trump loyalists. Trump has had so many people since his last administration who have shot him in the back and the front, metaphorically speaking, of course. And he obviously doesn't want any more of that. The sort of the Kellys and others who said things that he completely disputes about him. It's clear they don't want that kind of roller coaster anymore. And so I think it's going to be very, very interesting to see the more appointments that come in the coming days.
I think you're 100% right. And it's very clear now that he's not going to repeat those mistakes. He's not going to have these rivals in the inner sanctum. I think he thought initially it was a way of countering the anti-Trumpers to keep your enemies closer, but that's not the way to get things done. And I think, 2.0 is going to be very different. You wrote a piece for the New York Post on the 10 things Donald Trump can do to clean up Joe Biden's messes abroad, starting with Ukraine and ending with Iran. He's got plenty of messes to clean up domestically, Douglas. How much focus do you think will be on foreign affairs?
Well, I think there'll be a significant amount, but the main thing is just Donald Trump being president-elect is already starting to change the calibration of the world. He is somebody who understood and has understood for years the Chinese Communist Party as the main strategic competitor to the United States. And he realized that Americans had, to a great extent, been taken for a ride in trade terms for years. The best part of a quarter of a century by now. He's the only president, I think, who's in a position to actually do something about that. He says he wants to bring about a swift end to the Ukraine conflict. As I said, we'll see about that. But there's a lot of opportunity and potential there. The Middle East is where I think he's going to have the biggest impact, because the Ayatollahs in Iran were being throttled by him economically when he was last in office. And I would hope that he would
Mm.
start to do that again, because, of course, we've seen in the last year in particular what happens when the revolutionary Islamic government of Iran is rich. It exports terror and colonialism across the region. So I think there's going to be a massive shift there. There are also big strategic questions. We have seen this axis that has come together in Joe Biden's time in office, which is the, for want of a better, abbreviation, the Russia, China, North Korea, Iran axis. And it's going to be very important to pull
Mm.
that apart. China will be the one that's most important to pull apart from Russia. It's relatively easy to pull people away from Iran when people realize that the Ayatollahs will become the pariahs that they should always have been. But there's a lot of opportunity here, and already there are rumors. We'll see what happens. But the terror sponsoring slave state of Qatar has already started to say that it might end up not actually remaining a retirement home, or indeed a base for the terrorist group Hamas. And that'll be interesting to see if Qatar realizes that it backed in every single way the losing side.
Now, you summed it up beautifully in the Telegraph when you said this election wasn't about race, it wasn't about gender and abortion, all the issues the media seem to be hyper focused on. It was about secure borders, the economy, and government overreach. And I would argue, Douglas, that last point was hugely significant for many of Trump's voters. The lawfare against Trump and his allies, this two-tier justice system that even targets conservative mums at school board meetings. It's a big issue for many in Trump's base.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, the interesting thing about not just the radical left, but the left in general in Australia, in Britain, in the US and other Western countries, Canada particularly, is that the moderate left thought that there were all of these issues which were like right-wing talking points, or what didn't really affect people's lives. Professional dolts like Alistair Campbell in the UK have just started in recent
Mm.
days to sort of start to say maybe the thing of big hairy men being allowed in women's locker spaces is in locker rooms is not something that is just being made up by right-wing fanatics. Maybe we should have listened to women, they say, this late in the day. Not just the far left, the center left, the moderate left, vastly underestimated the way in which culture war issues are not made up by conservative pundits, but are things that are felt by any parent whose daughter is training in an elite sport. It's felt in people's lives. It's felt by parents whose children come back from school having been told that there are a million genders and a lot of other woo-woo nonsense. And when it comes to things like the border, they seem to hope, the Democrats seem to hope that the American public would not think anything particularly awry and would just be told it was a Project 2025 conspiracy, that for 4 years the border had been open and millions of people had come into the United States illegally. They thought that people didn't mind about that. They thought they could take these votes for granted. And the amazing thing is that they thought they could do this by playing the DEI game at the highest possible
Mm.
level. Why wouldn't you want to vote for Kamala? She's a woman. If you're a woman, you have to vote for Kamala. Guess what? Kamala's from an ethnic minority. Unless you hate ethnic minorities, why would you not vote for Kamala? I mean, this was seriously their pitch. And then you got all of the Democrat commentators on the media who zoomed in on the abortion issue again, when this is actually something which has
Mm.
healed significantly in the United States in the last few years since the overturning of Roe v. Wade, as people have realized that this is a state issue and states can vote one way or they can vote more another. But when you see these like white dudes for Harris who seemed to think that the most important thing about this election was to make it much easier for their daughter to abort their grandchild. It was like, why did you think that was an appealing message when you have cost of living crisis, you have the world having conflicts breaking out that didn't break out until recent years, when you have a totally open border, when you have the crime that comes from that, the debt that comes from that, the government overspend that comes from that. I mean, as Elon Musk said the other day, there's about $2 trillion a year you could shave off from the federal government's budget in the US. And one of the things you could do would be to strip out all of the wasteful, woke nonsense, among other things, which isn't just not helping America, it's holding it back. And if they can do that, if they can strip out this horrible, destructive mechanism that's been put in place in teaching, in education, where American taxpayers pay more per student than almost anyone else in the world, and get out of it one of the worst education results of anywhere in the world, including the developed world. These are things that are really serious. And the Democrats did not run a serious campaign. They had an unserious candidate who wouldn't even answer a question seriously. So thank goodness that the American public have seen through that.